Hello, and welcome back to Wild Sanative. After completing the shamanic apprenticeship, my journey did not end. In many ways, it was just beginning. I continued attending Blanca's workshops and teachings. There were other women in the group who had completed the apprenticeship as well. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was a part of a community where I could speak honestly about what was hurting in my heart without fear of being judged. It wasn't just about grief. There were many things in my life that felt painful. I did not come from a supportive family environment. Participating in a shamanic apprenticeship was viewed as something unusual, something strange, something that deserved criticism. I wanted to share what I was learning with people I loved. I wanted to talk about the healing that was happening, the insights, the growth, the hope I was beginning to feel. Instead, I was often met with sarcasm, judgment, mockery, and dismissal. I was treated as though I was doing something wrong, but I wasn't. And something interesting began to happen. Rather than becoming angry, I began to observe. I began to watch my reactions. I began to notice how certain interactions affected me. I began to notice how often I felt dismissed, how often I felt unseen, how often I felt I was expected to fill a role rather than to be valued as a person. I noticed the expectations placed upon me to cook, clean, serve, to sacrifice my own time and energy without acknowledgement. I noticed how often I was treated as though my thoughts carried little value, as though I lacked intelligence, as though my voice did not matter, and perhaps for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to convince people otherwise. I stopped chasing acceptance. I stopped trying to earn belonging from people who had already decided I did not belong. That realization was painful, but it was also freeing. The more I learned, the more I began turning my attention inward. I began journaling. I continued my sessions with Blanca. I attended workshops. I reflected deeply on the principles she had introduced: reverence, compassion, commitment, discipline, humility, integrity, forgiveness, observations. These were no longer just words. They were becoming practices. I began to look honestly at myself, my own imperfections, my own mistakes, my own moments where I had hurt others, my own emotional reactions, my own fears. I realized healing was not about becoming better than anyone else. It was about becoming more honest with myself. The observer was teaching me something important. Awareness is not judgment. Awareness is seeing clearly. The more I observed, the more I noticed how emotionally unavailable many people were. How often people reacted from pain rather than from understanding. How quickly conflict separated us, how it created separation, how fear created division. And I noticed those same tendencies within myself. I realized that much of my life I had been taught to fight, to defend, to protect myself at all costs. But true strength was asking something different of me. It was asking me to stand firmly in my convictions without destroying another person's spirit in the process. It was teaching me that compassion and strength are not opposite. They belong together. I began to understand that compassion is not weakness. Compassion is the ability to recognize the humanity within another person, even when you disagree with them. As my journey continued, these lessons followed me into advocacy work. I found myself speaking about these principles wherever I went, not as spiritual teachings, not as religious teachings, but as human teachings. The wisdom of compassion, the importance of humility, the value of discipline, the necessity of integrity, and the practice of observation. I began asking a question that still lives within me today. Why are we taught so many things about the world, yet so little about ourselves? Why are we not taught how to communicate with respect, how to navigate emotions, how to recognize our own biases, how to disagree without hatred, how to heal division? Everywhere I looked, I saw labels. Labels for people, labels for beliefs, labels for lifestyles, labels for politics, labels for religion, labels for where people live, where they eat, who they love, how they think, and how they choose to express themselves. The world seemed filled with labels, and labels often become walls. Walls that separated human beings from one another. The more I observed, the more I realized that many of the divisions we experience begin with the stories we attach to those labels. Yet beneath every label is a human being, a person carrying hopes, fears, pain, dreams, and a desire to belong. The principles I was learning offered another way, a way that asked me to look deeper, a way that encouraged understanding instead of assumption, connection instead of separation, compassion instead of judgment. These observations became clearer and clearer with time. I began seeing these patterns everywhere, in families, workplaces, and communities, in advocacy, in myself, and to this day I continue to observe. I continue to learn, I continue to question, and I continue to grow. Because the path of wholeness is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice of learning to see. And once you begin to see clearly, it becomes impossible to return to blindness. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, remember, awareness does not change the world overnight, but it changes the way we move through it.